Hi, I'm Andrew Holstad, a student senior at the at Texas A&M Corpus Christi in the GIS Geodetic Science program. And for my internship, I worked for a summer at Lone Star UAS, which is here in town, out on Flower Bluff at the Coastal Bend Innovation Center. It is A&M's UAV research arm. Um, And this is about the kind of work I did while I was there for a summer and have been continuing to do since, as I've been kept on as a part-time employee until my graduation here in 2019. If any of this looks interesting to you, I would highly encourage working there as well. They are looking for more future GIS interns. I applied for the USDA scholarship in 2017 at Dr. Sterrick's recommendation, and a big thank you to him for doing so. Because I was one of the 6 recipients selected and went to the AgriLife Research. 4 of them went to the AgriLife Research Center, and 2 of the recipients, me and a mechanical engineering student, Darcy, went to Lone Star. And they hadn't had a GIS intern out there before, so I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to be doing, and they weren't entirely sure how to use me as well at first. But so it was a great experience to see how I could apply my skills and get involved with a number of different projects, some of which I can go over here. A lot of the private work you can't really get into. But the public facing side, I can talk a bit about, and it's been a really cool experience. So you get a lot of great industry experience out of it, which will look good on a resume if you want to be a student, because they like to keep people on after their internships. They like to have student workers around if you do a good job. So I've been able to make a number of maps and write some code, a lot of Python scripts, which I'll show a little bit of here. So when I first got hired on before I got hired on, when I was doing my internship there, I started by making some test range maps. They have a number of flight test ranges at airfields around Texas that they work at. And they needed some exhibits done that could be put up on the walls in the office and when clients are coming through, that sort of thing, to show the different ranges they work at. And I've got a slide ahead that'll show those. Did a number of exhibits for private clients doing COA proposals to the FAA, and I'll explain what a COA proposal is as well, because I've been exposed to that quite a bit. All of this has to do with drone work, and even if you're going the land surveying route in the program, if you have any interest in flying a drone yourself as a skill you can offer your employer, there could be great experience to be here, as I think you'll see. So yeah, I made a lot of exhibit maps showing flight boundaries or infrastructure and points of interest, depending on what kind of commercial or industrial applications a client's looking for. I've written a number of Python scripts, most of which is converting telemetry data coming off the drones that the software engineers have been handed me in GeoJSON format typically, or CSV with some of the really raw stuff, and converting it to KML files through a number of different Python libraries. And the reason for that, as you'll see here, is it's a great way to visualize your flight boundaries and your actual flight telemetry, both for you and for any clients, to show them what you've done, just to test and make sure your data looks good. You'll see that ahead. Currently as well, I'm building a weather analysis application in Python, which I don't show here, but basically I'm entirely in Python, downloading data from the ASOS public airport weather data network to determine best flight windows, because drones can be finicky depending on the weather. So trying to build a calendar looking at historical data of proper flight windows depending on your location. So here's a sample Python script for converting GeoJSON to KML for UAV telemetry. And I'll upload this in high enough resolution. Hopefully you could zoom in and look if you want. It just shows kind of the level. I'm not doing any object-oriented programming in any real detailed sense. It's just pretty much straightforward scripts of the level that you learn with the classes, because even if you're doing the land surveying route, you've taken classes learning how to write some Python code. But if you didn't find it interesting, you might anyway in this sort of situation where it's being applied to something like this. Here's another example with the output KML file on the right. And this is the result, is you get instead of just looking at a stream of data where you can't tell if, some of the telemetry points are blown out and the entire thing's the wrong location because your projection, or if some of the data doesn't look right compared to another flight plan, you can just see it visually. As well, you can see the bounding box here for, in this case, it'd be kind of hard to explain this situation. Maybe I shouldn't anyway. But the green is the path of one drone. The red down here is the path of another. And this blue bounding box is the path that the red UAV needs to stay within. So that would be in the case of a COA, for example, certificate of authorization to the FAA. It's where you're saying you'll restrict your flight to. It's your flight restricting bounding box. And create a KML file that goes through all of this, as you can see on the left, and creates different folder structure and shows not only where the controller was, but the landing and takeoff location, and then when you pull these up, data on the vehicle itself. And it could be very helpful to clients or just to have in-house, obviously, for checking a number of things and just for records. Here's the airfields I made, airfield maps I made for Lone Star during my internship. They were done in QGIS. Because when I first started being the first GIS guy they had in there, they hadn't activated an Esri license yet. So I made these in QGIS to show what could be done with the open source option, just quick and dirty. But they're at a nice enough resolution that you could put them up on the wall, 36 by 48 or whatever you would want, and they look nice for clients. And I've done a number of similar things since with the actual ArcGIS license. So where is Lone Star? Again, it's out in the bluff. They have a mission control center there where they could do off-site monitoring and management, whether for disaster response through Texas Task Force, as I believe I have a slide in here that goes over a little bit, or for any number of reasons, if a private client wanted to go over it. And mostly are employed by software and aerospace engineers working on either the software for or the custom parts for drones of a number of different models. So this lists the kind of things they can do for you. Just over FAA coordination, because there's a lot of contact constantly with the FAA and NASA. They provide pilots and engineers and have a lot of experience with airspace analysis. And this is a better idea of some of the ranges around the area in Texas. Whether for ag or energy assets, and all over the panhandle then, down here off the coast in the Gulf and down in the valley, for better coastal mapping or whatever purposes you might need in a different climate down there. The pins showing actual airfields where they just right around the field themselves have some range. And then out by Big Bend. So you get different climates of all over Texas. One thing I've definitely needed to learn that I never thought I would in this program is a lot of aeronautical chart terminology, just because it's in the background of a lot of the maps, and it just helps a lot communicating with other employees here and knowing what people are looking for, having a different idea about the different kinds of airspace. Because a COA, Certificate of Authorization, is something that, again, making KML files of maps, I'm often making them for COA data as an exhibit to go in a COA, or just for an in-house, as part of a database of KML files that could be opened in Google Earth to show where these COA boundaries are. And COA just mean anytime you want, looking at this, well, if you get your Part 107, which even some of you land surveyors might be interested in doing, then there's obviously still a number of restrictions on what you can use it for. Under 55 pounds, under 400 feet, line of sight, daytime operations in Class G airspace. If you want to go beyond that, then you need to use, I can't go back a slide. If you want to do anything more than that, then you're looking at a COA, which you have to apply to the FAA, and it's, so I'll make exhibits that go along with that. But you're defining the airspace that you want to have extended access. You want to waive some of these restrictions on, whether that means night operations or line of sight, or whatever it is. And here's an example of one of the what they start with commercially and then do a bunch of custom retrofitting to, an AR-180, which can have a higher payload than something like a 3DR, which you can hold in your hand. Those are the ones you see at Best Buy. And And they're a lot larger, actually. I didn't realize it till I saw them in person. So it's pretty cool to be around the office and see a lot of there's just parts everywhere for different kinds of cool UAVs that are being built. Um, Texas moving forward. So the Texas Task Force is, Lone Star was named Air Wing 1. So Texas Task Force being disaster response at the local level, the state level, with the ability to help nearby states as well, other regions if needed. Harvey being a recent great experience or example of what this can be for. So for Lone Star, that could mean using the command center or a mobile command center, and then their experience as well of any sort of UAV, UAS operations, both for monitoring and being in charge of being the air boss, basically for deconflicting airspace. If there's a lot of drones flying around, whether that's doing, mapping of conditions before and after, or search and rescue. So that's the kind of thing. And there's been some software. There's been some different operations. I don't know that I can talk about them, but you do get to work a little bit and get some exposure to this, even in an internship in the GIS level, with any sort of way you can imagine being involved for a GIS angle, whether that's mapping and writing code, or like anything, in situations where they don't have beyond visual line of sight, which is normally, you still have to have spotters out in the field, so you could go out, even if you're not going to be a pilot, and get your Part 107 and still see the operations in person, along with dealing with the data on the back end in the office. So here's some obvious situations where that could come in handy, whether that's oil and gas rig disasters, where it's obviously a safety issue, and flying a drone out for monitoring could be a big help. Or hurricane response, Harvey was a great example. Any number of things unique to the coast down here. Task Force 1 is part of one of 28 nationally. So here's a map showing that. And that's basically an overview of the kind of stuff I've been doing here. I would definitely, if you're interested at all, even if you're going to go the land surveying route, if you're interested in all at getting some more exposure on the GIS end, whether it's just for UAVs, which obviously isn't specific to any one industry or angle of this degree, then, I mean, somewhere like Lone Star where they work on custom drones and you have people around you all day that can answer your questions on any number of things. And you can bring your own, coming from a surveying end, bring your own experience with GPS and some GIS that they can use. They can always find uses for this because they take private clients as well as working on the public end. They were originally mandated by the FAA in 2013 to work on setting up airspace regulations and research into that. They're one of 6 areas around the country designated for that. But I had a lot of experience working for that FAA work, so getting airspace terminology and knowledge of the permitting process. But beyond that, more GIS specifically, a lot of Python programming libraries of GIS nature, converting telemetry data between projections and GPS coordinates, and working with GeoJSON and XML and CSV files. I mentioned a couple of the QGIS maps here. There's plenty of work I've done in ArcMap as well, setting up a database, working on for KML files and a number of things. So if it's at all interesting, keep an eye out for any sort of scholarships, the general scholarships through the program in the school, or private ones as well. And I wish I could list a couple here. I don't know exactly what, in talking with them, Lone Star is still working on exactly how they'll be bringing more students from A&M in from the GIS department. But having one person, myself at least, come through and been successful enough that they've kept me on as a student employee, they would like to have more after I leave in the spring. And I cannot recommend it enough. Wonderful people to work with, a lot of great experience and knowledge, and a lot to show for. I've only listed a couple things here, but I'll have a lot to show for it, and some good opportunities possibly for my capstone project as well that I might take up on in the spring. So thanks for your time.